and that it continues on, although that as far as Marx's time is concerned, the real class war is between the new bourgeois, right? Which, by the way, I think if you're looking at how to spell that, it's almost more like bourgeoisie, or however you want to spell it out. But bourgeois, you might even hear a lot of people saying bouge, right, as a short for it, right? Or bougie, as if that's even a plug or a critique, depending, right? But what the bourgeois, as he explains, and historically I think this is pretty accurate, is that what happened as the Middle Ages changed, they went from a society of different groups that were promoters of a particular activity. So for example, if you were a carpenter, you had to first study with master carpenters. And in fact, you had to pay, your parents would probably have to pay a fee for you to work with carpenters and basically be, an apprentice to a master carpenter so that you learn how to do carpentry. And then once you've done that, you are now a full member of the guild of carpenters that are this particular art, building cabinets, or shoemaker. If you're, I don't know if you're Wagner fans, but the one of the neat operas is the Meistersinger. I don't know if you've ever heard this kind of music before. This is the overture to Die Meistersinger, and in this Wagner opera, the Die Meistersinger is the master singer, and so you actually have a town with a guild for singing, and every year they have a competition, and the winner of the competition wins a prize, and in this particular year the prize is a young woman that you get to marry, right? That's the prize. And of course the basic theme of the opera is there's an evil guy that wants to sing and win, and there's a young man who really deserves, of course, they're lovebirds, and he deserves to sing. And Hans Sachs, who is the master, basically works with the young man to make sure that he ends up with the song that wins. And it's a happy kind of, everybody's laughing at the evil guy at the end because he does such a horrible job, and etc. But the point is they have guilds that everybody needs to join. Well, these guilds actually have a communist lock on the way this particular art is done. You can't do it on your own. You're not allowed to have your own wood shop and just start on your own. You have to be part of the guild in order to get it, right? So in a sense, it's a communistic, communal kind of a society, right? Each of these guilds. By the way, I remember thinking that Marx is famous for inventing communism. That's certainly not the case. Communism was actually out there forever. It's basically a communal kind of thing. And there's lots of variants of it. And even in Marx's day, he was actually a proponent of democracy. Remember, he was a student in Berlin, which was Prussian. And at the time, that was the end of the reign of the one king and the beginning of the new king. The old king had been a proponent of liberal education. And his chief educator, Mr. Altdorf, was also for that. They both died almost at the same time, and so they got a new king, the fourth, Frederick the Fourth or whatever, and he was a born-again Christian and decided to become very conservative. It was almost like Trump in some respects, as opposed to a more liberal state. and he totally changed Prussia back to a much more conservative, no, you can't print this newspaper. And by the way, Marx kept getting kicked out of places because he was printing articles that were contrary to the state, and so he got kicked out of Berlin, then he was kicked out of Trier, or kicked out of Cologne, and then he went to Paris. And he ended up in Paris for about 14 months or so. And while he was there, he read a lot of French articles which convinced him that communism was really the best future. So and being a Hegelian, he thought that history was going to naturally, logically lead to a situation where the capitalists, the bourgeois, are going to make more and more money, right? Because they've gradually over time taken over for the guilds now, and they, instead of having a place where a young person could come in and learn a trade, instead now they're building factories where everything is cheaply made, and everybody's job is basically so miserable that you're alienated from your own work. When you were in a guild and you learned how to be a master craftsman, you were an artist. You were proud of your work. You put your soul into it to try to make sure you created the best table for your customer, knowing the needs of the customer, the kind of living conditions they were in, and what kind of table would be the best table, and the artwork and everything. It would last forever. A lot of people brought them to America when they migrated, and they had them in their living rooms until they died, and then people just sold it on at auctioneers or something. But if you were familiar with family heirlooms of that sort, you know that kind of old furniture was made absolutely beautifully, and the handcraftsmanship was just absolutely spectacular. And now you buy stuff that you can put together from IKEA, or is already put together. Just put the plastic plug in here and the plastic plug in here, and now you have a shelf which will last 5 years, 6 years. Don't get it wet, because that'll be destroyed. Industry is, and there's lots of pictures of little kids standing in like a factory line, and guess what? This is absolute torture for people that are now leaving the country and coming into cities and working in slums where they're actually slaving away at a job that's absolutely alienating. They hate it. It's not them. They're just putting the same thing over and over again all day long. They might even be chained to the chair, at a sewing factory or something. And so that's the conflict that Marx sees. And it's not just him. This is a generational thing in the 1840s, 1850s. In fact, in 1848, there's a revolution in Germany that was violently put down. And a lot of the people that Marx knew were involved in this. He missed it because he was in France at the time, because he had been kicked out because of his writings, right? So even though he was encouraging them, he wasn't in that himself. In fact, France would kick him out after 14 or 16 months, something like that. And the main thing too was that he was the editor of a paper in Cologne, right, where it only published a couple of editions, and the government closed it down because it didn't like what they were printing, right? So they got the idea of going to Paris and printing a new journal there, writing the same things and sending them, but instead of actually succeeding in sending them into Germany, the border guards captured all of the printings and destroyed them, so they weren't able to actually succeed in having a readership, and so their situation collapsed, and Marx ended up fleeing to London. And it was in London where there was a meeting of individuals that all came together and chose Marx to be the one to write their manifesto. And that's when Marx writes the Communist Manifesto. So by then, of course, he was completely bought into the idea of communism as the next stage that history should go to. And that would be achieved when the bourgeoisie were overthrown by the proletariat. Proletariat are the workers. So they also hear them called proles as opposed to proletariat, right? So proletariat. I remember in the Soviet Union, the phrase was proletariat всех стран соединяйтесь, which means the proletariat of all the countries unite, right? Because the Soviet Union thought that the communist revolution would continue on to all the other countries. And eventually, all the other countries would join the Soviet Union. Stalin, Lenin, before Stalin, was the one who, of course, overthrew the Tsar. I suppose everyone's familiar with that. Ilyich Lenin, yes. He has a book out called Shag Vperyod, Dva Shaga Nazad. I have a copy, actually, which means one step forward, two steps back. Which, what's fun is if you go to Amazon.
I remember looking at a documentary recently about the whole Russian Revolution. And the funny thing is, Lenin kind of came in the middle of it. He didn't even necessarily start it. And there was even like a provisional government set up that was more like democratically focused. And then Lenin just like formed his own little like clique, just sort of overthrew it and made himself like supreme, in charge. Which everyone hated, by the way.
That's a different one. That's not Lenin. Shoot. I mean, what would have been fun was showing you that on Amazon, the book reviews, there was only one book review of that book, and it was by me. Oh well, I'm not finding Amazon on that. But in any case, so Marx writes the Communist Manifesto, and when you look at the situations that the people are in, that he's in the neighborhood, he's living with these people because he's not wealthy. In fact, he couldn't handle money very well. So even though he got a salary from being an editor, which wasn't much, and he's having children with Jenny, and so if you've ever had children, you actually have to feed children. So it costs money to have children, and a wife too, because she wasn't working and she's taking care of the children. And they were middle class. They had been raised, both of them, middle class. So in a sense, they were bourgeois. And by the way, that's why initially he was actually supported by bourgeois, the bourgeois class in Cologne, and what they were really hoping for, and what he was hoping to write, was a revolution against, not a physical revolution, but a change in the political structure of the Prussian state, so that it was more liberal for the bourgeois to get ahead, instead of being kept in check by the old nobility class, which, I mean, in this change, this historical change, the bourgeois was basically overturning the nobles as the rich class, because the nobles' wealth was based on the land. So they got rents from the people using the land, and they made money off of the crops and the herds of sheep and goats and things that they had on the property. So their income was based on land. But what happened when the bourgeois classes begin is they're making products and they're having trade, with other countries, and the United States would be, of course, one of the main trading partners for a lot of European countries. So you've got lots of trade, and the bourgeois are manufacturing, and so they're making money and then investing money. And so within a short period of time, the bourgeois class are the ones with all the money. And the nobles have all the power. So you can see there is absolutely a conflict between them and the nobles wishing to have more money. Where you see this especially today